Hello, it's Adam with Tech Dive, and today we're talking about some editing theory. In video school, I used to get in arguments with people about which editing software I thought was best and why. Obviously, I think it's Vegas Creative Software because I push all their software on this channel, but my friend was arguing, he was like, what's the point of having that huge effects library that Vegas has and that huge transitions library, because you never see those kinds of effects and transitions used in major motion pictures. And I was like, that's not true. I've seen it in lots of major motion pictures. And he was like, name one. Star Wars. Star Wars uses lots of wipe effects. It uses crazy amounts of wipe effects. There's a clock wipe and a side wipe. It uses all sorts of wipes. It uses more wipes than I'm comfortable admitting it uses. And I didn't even notice that the first time I watched it, and I'm in video. I think one thing we can learn from Star Wars is you can use editing wipes. You can use these more extreme transitions. They use these wipe transitions tastefully and unapologetically. And I think one thing a lot of editors are talking about is hide your cuts, hide your cuts, hide your cuts. And I think maybe a better way of saying hide your cuts is use your cuts tastefully. We're always talking about following the action on your cuts, and we're talking about things like that. But I think Star Wars proves that there's more than one way to hide a cut in your editing. You just gotta own it and justify it. Star Wars didn't just use it one time. That would have been out of place. It used it over and over again. It used it in tasteful ways. It followed the action. These kinds of things I think is good as an editor, whether you're doing a documentary, you're doing a YouTube video, or you're making an actual motion picture. These kinds of things can be used tastefully as long as you're making an effort to use them consistently and make it part of the flow and the vocabulary of the film you're making. Something a lot of people don't know is there's actually a lot of Star Wars you don't see. There's a lot of Star Wars that never made the final cut. The team of editors that worked on Star Wars, including George Lucas, realized that there was just too much story. There's too many scenes. There was things that just weren't necessary. And as an editor, I think that's a big thing you can learn from Star Wars, is you need to look at your film and say, is this necessary? There's a whole beginning to Star Wars where Luke is looking up and seeing a battle happening, and he's talking to his friend, which you see later in the film when he meets up with him in the Rebel base. They cut out all that entirely, and even when he meets up with his friend, that's left in the film, but you don't need that. You don't need a backstory to understand that somebody had a friend at his hometown that joined the rebellion. You just figure it out. You gotta trust your audience. That's an extremely important skill, is being able to delete things. And all of media, whether it's writing or anything, deleting is the highest form of editing. Another thing I think Star Wars teaches us, and often in a very harsh way, is that nothing is sacred. When it comes to your project, there is nothing sacred about the final story or the final film. An editor has the ability to redub over things, add things in, composite new CGI things in. You can do things to improve the story. Now, I will admit, Star Wars has gone too far because they've released it, everyone had this nostalgic feeling, and then they continue to edit it after the release. I'm not arguing that you should continue to edit things after the release, but the original does teach us that not being afraid to redub things, draw lines over things, edit the crap out of it, not being afraid to add more to the story in post-production is a good thing. I think not being afraid to be the master of the subject matter as the editor, that's your job. When you're editing your project, your job is to bring this thing to a full circle. It's to bring a story, a presentation out of your project. And if you have to add things in, add special effects in or things like that, that's what you gotta do. In video school, one of my teachers kept telling us, you can't be afraid to kill your babies. And what he means is, when you have a project, you have this idea in your head, you have several ideas in your head, and one of them you just feel like is so good, it's such a good idea, you have to do that idea. And you spend extra time filming it, you spend extra time editing it, you spend extra time working on it, and when you get there, you get to a point where you're like, it just doesn't fit anymore. My idea, it seems so good, but then you get there and you realize it's just not worth it. It's just not helpful. I just don't need that idea. That idea that was my baby, I gotta kill it. I'm just gonna have to either draw lines over it, delete it, dub over it, something. But nothing is sacred. The project, the final project is what matters when it comes to video. Thank you so much for watching this editing theory video where we talked about the 3 things that Star Wars can really teach us. If you're interested in more editing tutorials or editing theory or video production stuff, check out this channel. We do a lot of Vegas Creative software tutorials and more on top of that as far as production. Anything you buy through our affiliates links helps us out a ton. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.